I'm going to call the meeting to the order. The Colchester Planning Commission is 7 o'clock. Agenda considerations received for changes to agenda items.
Yep, so Rich, as you were just mentioning before, since Kathy Ann was not able to make it to this meeting, we're just going to push the item, agenda item 7, initial discussion of items for potential inclusion in future supplement 48 to the next meeting of the Planning Commission in December. We can talk about that date later, but for the purposes of anyone watching at home or anyone in the room, that item will not be heard tonight.
Great, thank you. Okay, comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda? All right, so now we need a motion.
Okay, I move to recess as the Planning Commission and reconvene as the CRS Public Information Committee.
Need a second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all right. We are now convened as the CRS.
All right.
Hi. Am I on?
You are.
Yep.
Okay. Very close. Like on top of it. Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Adams. Some familiar faces from when I worked in the Planning and Zoning Office, wow, 7 years ago now. But I'm in Public Works. I do mainly water quality work for the town, and Kathy Ann had asked me to come and report on implementation of the hazard mitigation plan. Hazard mitigation plan, the town having an approved plan, is what gets the town credit under the CRS Activity 510. That's a floodplain management requirement. They award credits to communities who have a plan, and then you have to report on the progress of implementing that plan to keep that credit. So there's 4 mitigation actions that are identified that are intended to address inundation flooding, which is one of the main hazards that the town has identified facing Colchester. And so I'm here to talk about the first 3. The stormwater utility is something DPW oversees, as well as the implementation of planning documents related to regulatory requirements. So if you would pop, those are the 3 I'll talk with you a little bit about tonight. And some of you may know a little bit about what a stormwater utility is, but I thought we could all just go over that real quick because continued operation of a stormwater utility is mitigation activity number 1. So first, stormwater is rainwater that just can't be absorbed into the ground because there are surfaces like buildings, pavement, gravel, other things that have been put on the landscape that limit the permeability or the absorption of the ground, of water by the ground. And so that water generally runs off either into receiving water, a stream or a waterway, or into a public or private stormwater system, which is usually collection structures. They're the grates in the street that you might be familiar with, and those generally go to underground pipes that then take it to a river or stream. And so a stormwater utility is one approach to funding the operation, design, permitting, and other requirements associated with managing that system. We have to have a public stormwater system under our federal stormwater permits. It's an EPA requirement for communities of a certain density. So that's why we're in this realm, and Colchester adopted a stormwater utility in 2017, which all of you hopefully are familiar with from the invoices you receive annually that fund the program. And so those invoices or stormwater fees are based on how much impervious surface is on the property that you own. Residential properties all pay the same base fee, and then properties that are either commercial, institutional, or have some other uses on them pay a fee that's based on how much actual impervious surface is on their property as measured by aerial imagery that is then assessed, and basically UVM, the spatial analysis lab, assigns whether it's pervious or impervious, and that's what we use as the basis for our billing. So what does the stormwater utility do? So I kept it limited here to things that are associated with flooding, but there's many things that we do. The sweeper that's pictured on the left, my left, here is a key component of making sure our stormwater system is clean. You don't want the capacity of that system to hold and convey water to be taken up by debris and leaves and other things that shouldn't be in that system. So we sweep roadways, generally roadways that are paved and curbed, because those are most likely to have a piped stormwater system. But some roads don't have curbs, and they're also paved just to limit debris in the roadway. So we clean the roads. We also, the back of the sweeper truck has a vacuum attachment, and so we use that to suck out any debris or sediment that's in catch basins. Those are those collection structures in the street. So we try to eliminate it from the roadway surface. What makes it into the system, we try to remove. And then we also manage what we call end-of-pipe treatments, which are basically outfalls or discharge points where we also are removing sediment or other things from them frequently to make sure that we're maintaining the hydraulic capacity of the stormwater system. So we're also looking at that hydraulic capacity and areas where it seems like we need more. If there's ponding at the roadway surface, that's a good indication either the water just isn't getting where it needs to go or the system is overwhelmed and can't accept any more water. We also review land development proposals that are by your counterpart, the DRB. That's part of the process, is to make sure that any public infrastructure will meet the town standard for drainage, and that things like access and maintenance are being considered because the town will need to maintain that structure or that outfall or whatever it may be, and we need reasonable access to do that in the future. Sometimes folks aren't thinking of that when they're constructing something new, but those are the things we're thinking about when we review those proposals. And also, as part of our federal stormwater permit, we need to have all sorts of planning documents in place. I say planning documents, but these are really roadmaps to getting towards ultimate compliance under our permits. So the flow restoration plan and phosphorus control plan are two examples of this. The phosphorus control plan is a series of projects that, once implemented, will improve stormwater by reducing pollutants that are in that water. So as stormwater moves across the landscape, it brings with it anything that's on the surface, things like cigarette butts, pet waste, oils, chemicals, trash. All of that goes into the stormwater system if it isn't picked up by the sweeper. And the phosphorus control plan is a way to list out all the projects that we'll need to do to achieve regulatory targets for reducing those pollutants by 20% is our target. And then the flow restoration plan is on the other side of regulatory concern. It's about quantity of stormwater. So phosphorus control plan, quality of water. Flow restoration plan is quantity of water. They're looking at making sure you're constructing infiltration projects, removing impervious surface, getting that water into the ground, because that's what recharges our streams and other waterways. And so those are the two kind of angles that the state is requiring us to look at our system with and make significant improvements over time. The pictures I wanted to feature here on the, again, my left, this is an example of a culvert replacement project on Lower Mountain View Drive. If anyone goes to Costco or the bowling alley regularly, you're driving over this culvert when you do that. And the pipe that is running across, the two PVC pipes at the bottom, is actually the gravity sewer that serves Costco and those other areas. And on site, this was a night job, you could see there was about this much distance between the sewer line and the stormwater line. We'd obviously like more than that, but I just used that picture to show we're making upgrades in areas that are already developed, already constrained, and they can be very tricky and challenging with wetland requirements, stream alteration permits. You know, you've got all sorts of things to consider. The other projects are just recent work we've done on gravel roadways. Gravel roadways are unfortunately quite a large contributor of pollutants. The roadway surface in rainstorms sloughs off into the stormwater system. And so there's a big push statewide to make drainage improvements on those roadways to ensure we're not losing that sediment and just packing our streams and reducing the capacity of those streams because of that presence of sediment. So I think I might have one more slide. Yes, or two maybe. I wanted to highlight a little bit of the utility work that I've been involved with since we started in 2017. We started by wanting to take a step back and just kind of see everything we had. You know, there was a stormwater program before the utility, but they didn't have a dedicated manager that was overseeing the assets and writing grants and doing budgeting. And so the first thing we did was we were lucky enough to get a grant to do a video inspection project of all of our pipes. So an example of what this looks like is on the left here. But there we have 1,100 pipes. It equates to around 21 miles of piping. It's a significant amount of underground infrastructure. All of those pipes are a big hole under the road. It's a cavity that represents a hazard to motorists if it's not maintained appropriately. That's where sinkholes happen, and it can be a real safety concern. So we wanted to look at everything and then be able to assess, is it good, bad, does it need assistance? Should we be replacing it? Should we be upsizing it? Is there, for example, we found a couple of gas lines that were bored through construction projects that we just didn't know about. And so that was a really great activity. We looked at all of that data and basically have put together a 5-year capital plan now, understanding every year we're taking off a bite-sized chunk of pipes to address. We either address them through a process called lining, which is basically a cured-in-place liner that restores the integrity of the pipe. A lot of these older pipes are metal, and unfortunately metal and water is not a great combination, so a lot of pipes have lost some of their integrity or been misshapen over time. And so lining basically makes it as hard as it was the first day, and has like a 40-year warranty for that structural integrity. So it's a really cost-effective way to get that maintenance that we need. And open cutting is the term used when you're literally peeling the soil off and putting a new pipe in. It's about 4 times cheaper than that. So it's a strategy that the utility has gone really hard after because it's very cost effective. So we did that as our first project. We've now since then lined 4,300 feet of our 21 miles. So we have some more work to do, but a lot of that is newer pipe and it's plastic, which is good news for us. We've also upsized 4 key culvert crossings. This is important for flooding resiliency because it can basically be a choke point. So, for example, 36 or 48-inch culverts don't really allow much debris to pass through. If you're thinking of larger rain events, you've got tree branches or other things. There's also beaver activity and other things that can address or limit the capacity of those pipes. And so we've done 4 replacement projects where we've significantly upsized them, which also has the benefit of meeting the state's aquatic organism passage requirements. We want frogs and other fish, other species to be able to move through those areas as well, since they actually are habitat. And we've also been lucky enough and are really grateful for around $1.5 million in grants to do some of the work that I've talked about. I wanted to show an example of a project. This was actually out behind the police station. So this outfall serves the town office complex here that we're in partially. And on the left was a failure of that pipe. Basically, it was a bunch of pipe sections that came to an outfall at Smith Creek at the river elevation, and the pipe sections got disjointed from each other and basically caused the entire side of that hillside to erode. So we were lucky enough to secure some grant funding to replace that outfall and create what's called a plunge pool. That's hard to tell in the picture on the right, but there's kind of a depressed area right when the pipe discharges for it to settle and settle out sediments before it then would overtop to go down to the stream, which is at the bottom part of this picture. Do I have one more? Questions? So I know I've thrown a lot at you, but I just wanted to give you some updates about what we're doing water quality related. Happy to answer any questions you have about CRS or about water quality.
So are we not talking about like flooding and safety and, the preparation of?
Sure, so
can I ask my questions and then you?
Oh, of course.
Would that
yes.
be okay?
Yeah.
So do we have like a map or something that identifies land in Colchester that is either at high risk or more risk for flooding in a worst-case scenario? So that's one question.
Sure, so that's a great question. Planning and zoning staff might have a better answer of whether we have anything above and beyond flood insurance maps. So FEMA publishes maps that identify risk areas where flood insurance is required if you have a federally backed mortgage. One of the benefits of the CRS program is that it offers, by enrolling in it and by getting these credits, we're offering a reduction in that flood insurance cost to our property owners. I'm not aware of a map that identifies flooding risk. I think there's fluvial erosion hazard mapping, but I don't know that that is exactly the same as flooding. Do you want to add anything to that? That's more about erosion of the stream bank.
I'll just say, I think those are honestly the resources that, are most commonly referenced. For example, though, we do in Colchester have a floodplain zoning district as well, so that information is usually, those what are often 2D. They're not very usable, the flood insurance rate maps. There is kind of a way to overlay that in the zoning, and it's pretty apparent to property owners, or at least we hope it is. But generally, that's the baseline of information that people are working off of. Emily, if you want to add on, you're welcome to, but no pressure to.
Isn't there like on the maps also, or kind of the guide maps, you can select the floodplain district as well?
Yep. Yeah, so same way, yep.
Yep, that comes up as one of our zoning districts. We have it in our regulations. I believe our maps that we have for flooding mirror what we have, or what FEMA has. So FEMA does have their map services, so you can pull up, type in your address, and you see similar outlines. Their satellite imagery, the layer behind might be a couple years older, but it's the same kind of information. And similarly, that information can be accessed on like the ANR Atlas and the ANR Wetlands Inventory. You have to find kind of where to click in the layers to get those to turn on. And I know FEMA, they used to call it the 100-year floodplain, and then I think it was the 500-year, and they've kind of moved away from that because people were tending to think that, oh, you'd only have a flooding event once every 100 years, but it was that chance of that 100-year level flood every year. So now I believe it's the 1% floodplain and then the 0.5. But we really kind of focus on that 1%, or what was used to be referred as the 100-year floodplain. But even if you're not in a mapped floodplain, there's still always a risk of flooding. But we do that on the assessor's map. That comes up, the floodplain, so anybody can type in their address, turn on the layer, zoning districts, see that. They can go on to FEMA, and it'd be the same information, just on a different resource.
And do you know that they're I know FEMA's maps are really outdated, and I know they were doing a new one, they were updating it. Are they updated now for the current kind of flooding that we're seeing in Vermont?
I believe ours were from 2011 with some minor updates in 2014, which
That's
is
good.
pretty recent for
Yeah.
Vermont. There are still quite a few towns in Vermont that have paper ones from like 80s. There was some recent, and it's a multi-year process to update those. And I know the Lamoille Valley, they're getting kind of on the second half of finalizing or updating the Lamoille River. Which the parts that impact Colchester's, there's a few slivers, and I attended one of the kind of notification events, and it didn't appear that there was much change in Colchester with that kind of remapping project up north.
Just a couple more.
Go for it.
That's right. So I'm assuming that what I understand of our role is to make sure that the community has an awareness of what to do in the event of a flood. Is that pretty accurate?
That's one of the components. One of the big components is kind of being prepared and, updating things to prevent those catastrophic, camps, being not blown away, but washed away. Those things. So when people are looking to do major renovations on camps that are in a floodplain, that, I hate to say it, it's still an insurance program. So obviously they want it, it's for the, life safety of folks, and obviously folks can get out and remove themselves from that risk. That's the best, but preventing, further damage, further insurance claims, really protecting the property, and therefore if properties be able to be protected, higher chances of people being protected as well. So there's a lot of it is getting information out. Hey, you're in a floodplain. Hey, this is what you can do to help mitigate your risk, help make things, improve things. And then another component is that kind of being prepared if that event happens. So it's one of the aspects of this program.
Yep. So that kind of preparation, like if that event happened, like a flooding, like, do we, like, have a video that people can watch about what they can do, who they can call? You know, if the internet doesn't work, or if they can't contact anybody, what they need to do, what the town response will be. And then just like, I'm thinking of, you know, different populations, like disabled people, or elderly people, or people with very young children, you know, just people who don't speak English. Just how are we kind of up in front of any kind of disaster? How are we helping to prepare them to understand, in the event of a disaster, what resources are available to them?
You may want to consider inviting our emergency management staff to explain to you
Yeah.
what strategies they use around
Yeah.
that. I know they do exercises, I think, annually, where they meet and discuss that sort of thing. What
Yeah.
are critical facilities? How are we going to get these residents out? You know, stuff like
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
I know during my time in planning and zoning, we did a couple of mailings to folks who were in the floodplain. I mean, taking one step back, there's another activity where the town receives some pretty significant credit for having such restrictive floodplain regulations. Surprisingly, FEMA does not restrict development. I mean, there are requirements about building safely. But for Colchester to take the additional step and say, no new structures, certainly, and or where people would live, and have pretty stringent rebuild requirements, like they're set by the flood insurance program, but if you're rebuilding, and I think it's a 35% increase in value of the property, you need to flood-proof that property. Well, you hit 35% of the value of the property pretty quickly.
And that's actually the building value, so not the
Right.
whole parcel value, so that number is gonna be a lot lower, like, oh, my whole property is assessed at 300,000, but the structure itself is only valued at 165. It's 35%, that 165 over 10 years cumulative. So that's a low threshold to trigger requiring floodproofing.
But so I know that there has been outreach to those communities, those sort of subset of our community in the past. I also know there's some links on the website to the extensive work that Vermont Emergency Management has put together for flooding and flooding response in terms of resources for people. But it may be good to have someone like a Seth come in and talk about how they think about those things and what the town does to prepare that, what type of contacts they develop in those, with those communities and populations, because I think he would be best positioned to answer that.
I may be the only one on this
No, I think that's really
committee.
important.
No, but I just want to say, you know, I'd be glad to meet with him
Mhm.
if, you know, the other members, you know, are fine with not. But I'm just curious, because I just have been involved in kind of what happens to people, you know, when they hear about a weather that's coming during a flood, and then recovery. And the best thing is to have them very aware, you know, of what to do. Kind of like it you know, ingrained in their thinking, if, you know, about what to do in case of a flood, an unexpected flood comes. So,
Sure.
and again, as I understand our responsibility to sign off on the federal paper, you know, that's kind of I'm understanding it to be our responsibility to assure
Sure.
that people are, you know, well aware of what the risks are and what to do in the event of, you know, a bad flood.
Sure.
We also we convene twice a year with this group, the CRS. So
Okay.
we could actually have him come and talk to us at one of those meetings.
Yeah. I would appreciate it, but I don't, you know, that's
It's
just,
information for all of us.
yeah,
And it's publicly put out, so, yeah, it helps.
okay.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You have any other questions? No? No? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yes, very good.
All right.
All right, so now we move on. Now we have the consider the 23 to 24 program for public information. Emily Johnson, first time we've got you here, get you out of the office.
Yes. So I'm Emily Johnson. I work down in planning and zoning. I'm the development review planner, so I help Zach when he needs help, and kind of day-to-day, though, is the building permits and kind of run-of-the-mill stuff in our department. But one of the hats that I've kind of picked up along the way, along with Deputy Town Health Officer, which kind of plays into the role of notifying folks for public health hazards, which floods kind of stir up a lot of not nice things, is working as one of the floodplain administrators. So I'm kind of the daily point person if someone has a question. My colleagues can help as well. I tend to end up they just come to me, or I tend to answer those questions. So if someone's like, hey, I have a seasonal camp, out in the floodplain, I want to, either redo it, make it year-round, raise it, whatever. We're advising them to know the requirements that we have for development. As Karen had mentioned, we don't allow any new development. So if there's a structure there, they're allowed to maintain that footprint. They can't make it bigger. If they can have space on the parcel and they want to move it outside the floodplain, even better. But if they're looking to keep the structure they have there, they're limited to work with that. So that's something we really kind of have a lot of eyes on. Also kind of plays hand in hand a lot of times, not always. They're going to be within that shoreline district. And since we have delegation over that, we're kind of having two sets of standards, kind of additional standards that we'd have to apply. A lot of them are similar. The floodplain and shoreline within 100 feet are similar. But FEMA, we do have more restrictive requirements. As part of the CRS, as Karen had mentioned, the CRS, it's a voluntary program. Colchester opted to become part of it. It gives our residents a discount on their flood insurance rates. There's different classes, so as you move, the numbers are a little wonky. So 9's the lowest class with the lowest percentage rate discount. You move up, you get a higher discount on that. So we're kind of on the lower end, but we also thankfully don't have a lot of flooding. Some of the higher ones are a lot of coastal communities that have their bigger cities that have whole departments staffed for that. So we look when people come in, if they have questions, we answer it. We've had quite a few. We keep a spreadsheet of any time we have a contact with somebody. So even if the structure's not in the floodplain, we know if there's floodplain on the property. And so far this year, we've had about 76 kind of either communications, not all permits. Sometimes it's questions, sometimes it's a Bianchi letter, but kind of 76 interactions at this point with a property that has floodplain at least on it somewhere. As far as the program, we send out communications to try to let people know of the requirements, of the resources available. We're here to help. Not finding that layer on the map, we can show you, come to our department, we can walk you through where to get it, how to access it, kind of what it means. And then, and the CRS program, they have outlines for what activities qualify for points. The more points you have, the higher, you change classes. So you can't just say, I mailed out a letter that said, contact us for flood information. There's requirements that are outlined so to make sure you're conveying a topic that they want in a manner that they feel is appropriate. And kind of within that, at least with the PPI, we've kind of went through, we updated it. We no longer use Notify Me as a application to notify folks. We have that weekly newsletter. So we updated that. One suggestion I made, because every town's different, so what might work for one town to get information out might not work for another. Adding a table at the autumnal market, so to put a face to at least our department. We're not that scary. We're nice, we promise. We don't have free pens, but just kind of put a face to that, because you can get something in the mail or in an email and say, okay, cool. But putting a face to that, and another recommendation that I had was at least having the option for either like homeowners associations, like I think it's Valleyfield off of Mounts Bay, have a lot of that. It's not necessarily floodplain, but it's wetlands, and when things are wet, things are wet. So offering the ability to either speak at the library or for a homeowners association or an interest group about flooding. So giving that as a service to folks as well if that's something they'd be interested in. And also open to any ideas for ways that you think folks might be able to reach, or, you know, a better way to reach out to folks and see how that we can make that work with the CRS program. So, felt like I rambled, I'm sorry.
You're fine.
But, and I think also in the PPI program, I think there were just a few minor just kind of date edits that were made. But we had the red line copy. Any questions, kind of like daily stuff or the process?
I'm just wondering about the video, you know, if there was a site people could go, you know, and just learn about, I don't know, because I think I'm in Montpelier so much and seeing the destruction in Montpelier and Barry. I just wonder, you know, I have no idea if Colchester has that degree of, you know, possibility of damage, but, you know, I just wouldn't want anybody blindsided. I'd want people to have had access to in the event that this happens.
So more like after the fact information?
No.
Or like,
During, but maybe that presentation, we'll learn, but just so they could go online, click on something, and watch a 20-minute video of, in the event of a storm coming, or a hurricane coming, or a tornado. I mean, I don't know what's heading our way, but these are the resources that, this is who you should call, this is what you should have in your house, you know.
So, yeah, we do have a flood ready page on our town website. The
Yep.
state does have one, and FEMA does have one. One of my kind of like side winter projects, I'd like to make at least a little more organized, the information or the links on there. I can't do anything necessarily about the content. Some of it is still kind of like pretty not easily digestible.
Yep.
But those are documents from FEMA, so, but at least organizing the access, be like, if you have questions about this, here's the document, or a document, or a flyer, or whatever. I could also always check, thinking about checking other communities that have more robust CRS programs, see what they have. There is kind of a CRS, you know, community involved. There isn't one in Vermont. There's other states and regions that have kind of communities where they can bounce ideas off. So always reach out somewhere else or check other municipality websites, even if it's on the other side of the country, if it's applicable and it makes sense and we're able to use it. You know, I reinvent the wheel if there's something there that is done and gets the point across. So kind of doing some research to see how other towns
Yep.
do things and
Great.
utilize that. But I think meeting with Seth for kind of that logistic part would make sense, because that is kind of more, you can speak way more to that than I could regarding
Okay.
flooding.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Yep, jump right in.
So I am a certified floodplain manager. That's something I pursued when I was in planning and zoning. It was great to learn about. And one of the things that that made sense to me as I learned more about it is Vermont is unique in the sense that it's lake flooding. Most communities have coastal flooding, so it's a different, there's no storm surge, it's a different dynamic. And I recall a number of communities around Lake Michigan being like very prepared, so that might be somewhere to look in your CRS network. The other thing that occurred to me while you were talking, Emily, was the stormwater utility, hopefully you're familiar with it, sends out a newsletter to every household or every property in Colchester twice a year. And so Sue in our office kind of oversees that outreach effort. It's part of our stormwater permit, again, to do public outreach. And so if you ever wanted to like co-opt half a panel and just talk about flooding preparedness or links to where you could find more information, if that was something that resonated with the property owner, certainly DPW would love to work with you on that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, there are no more questions, we'll look for a motion.
Okay, so I'll make the motion, but what we're approving is
The program.
what was in the packet. It's on the screen now, okay.
Yep.
Got the
Oh,
changes.
sorry, I kind of left it on one page, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. It was redlined, and that's what
Yep.
we're approving. Okay.
Correct.
So I'll move to approve the program for public information as amended and submit it to the Colchester Select Board for adoption.
Second? All right. All in favor? Motion approves. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you so
Good
much.
night. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah, thank you, Emily.
All right, now we need a motion.
I move to adjourn the CRS Public Information Committee and reconvene as the Planning Commission.
All right, second.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all
Aye.
right. We are now reconvene as the Colchester Planning Commission. It's 7:35. All right, so we are skipping, as recommended, number 7, and we're going to move to the minutes. And
Okay.
do we have any questions? If not, we'll make a motion to approve.
Move to approve the minutes of October 1st, 2024.
Second?
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion's approved. Now we need a motion to adjourn.
Wait,
What?
when is our next meeting?
Yeah,
We
that's
haven't
on.
discussed that, but it's in this first week in December.
First week in December, the first Tuesday?
First Tuesday in
Tuesday.
December.
Yeah, so that's December 3rd.
Third.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we need a motion to adjourn.
Move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second. Second, very good, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, thank you. We're adjourned.
That's probably the shortest meeting we've ever had.